This is the Mormon Mixed Faith Marriage Podcast with certified life coach Brooke Booth, episode number 96. Okay, this podcast, we're going to talk about sunk costs. And I want to talk about them, obviously, in the context of a mixed faith marriage. But before we go there, let's understand the concept fully, because I see it showing up a fair bit in my coaching calls with my clients. Where this all got started is I have a sister, and we like to send each other TikToks. Like, we can have whole conversations just with TikToks. And we communicate that way. And then we like to add our own commentary and our own thoughts and our own conclusions and deductions from them. But it's kind of a fun way for us to communicate. And they're usually TikToks about relationship and gender roles and all sorts of fascinating things. We can't seem to get enough of it. But one of the recent ones she sent me was on sunk costs. And it got me really thinking about this concept. And I started to see it showing up more and more with mixed faith marriages. So the TikTok was talking about the sunk cost as a logical fallacy, and how we don't change things, even though they're not really serving us or we don't like them anymore, because of the sunk costs that we've invested in them. So let me tell you what the sunk cost fallacy is. It describes our tendency to follow through on an endeavor if we've already invested time, effort, or money, and whether or not the current costs outweigh the benefits. So just a really simple example is, let's say you're watching a movie, you're 30 minutes into it, you realize you don't really love it. It's not what you expected. It's not the type of movie you wanted to be watching. And instead of finding another movie, you convince yourself to continue because you've already invested half an hour into it, and it's just an hour and a half movie, right? An example of sunk costs. So when my sister and I started to explore this idea of sunk costs, we started to see it everywhere. Of course, we saw it like in marriages and relationships, and I'll discuss that more here, but we see it jobs for sure, houses, vacation destinations, other relationships besides our marriage, religion. Like, even I was thinking like yoga studios and my hairdresser and like grocery stores. Like, we have doctors for sure, sunk costs when we establish relationships or whatever. Instead of going out and finding one that maybe will fit us better or suit us better, we stay because of the sunk costs. We worry about not doing things or doing things or changing things because of the sunk costs. My sister was talking about jobs, especially. Like, we've both experienced this where, we've invested so much here, or we've already established a network, or this is such a natural position for the education, or we have such great coworkers. Like, the sunk cost of a current job position can really stop us from finding something better or something that we may enjoy more. I have definitely experienced this with houses. The kids, such a great school, the kids have friends, we've already redone these projects, we like this award, we have established doctors. These are all examples of sunk costs that can prevent us from maybe even finding something better. I've definitely seen where sunk costs can paralyze. If you want to do something different, but because of the sunk costs, you're paralyzed, and you keep doing something you don't love, or even you keep doing things, you don't go after things that you want, or you don't go after things that you'd like because you're afraid of the sunk costs. Okay, let's talk about how this can look like in a mixed faith marriage, because I see it showing up in a few different ways. One way is we're so afraid of losing those sunk costs that we don't bring things up that need to be brought up and discussed. We're so afraid of losing sunk costs that we don't change things that need to be changed. So it may look like not having a conversation about your faith transition. It may be looking like not having a conversation about your spouse's faith transition, where it's just where we're hiding and hoping things go away and hope they change without us having to do anything about it. It's a hope, but not in a powerful way. It's a little bit of like hope is in denial and not hope as in empowerment. I hope this is just a phase. It's a lot of hiding and denial and avoidance because we're so afraid of losing the sunk costs. And so this type of approach keeps us hiding, not accepting what's happening, not facing the reality, and therefore not actually doing some work to help keep things healthy and good, and communication, and pulling in resources and assistance when that needs to be done. When we're hiding and not accepting the situation and the reality, we're not getting help. We're not finding solutions. We're not exploring things that can be helpful. Another way I see it is like, we have so much history together, it may sound like, even though I don't love this relationship anymore, or this particular aspect of the relationship isn't working for me anymore, I won't make changes because, and this is similar to the first, because I don't want to lose the sunk costs. I won't get counseling or find a coach because it might shake things up. And I don't want to risk anything here. Yet very similar to the first. One tends to be like where we're hiding from the reality. And this one is more like, I don't want to go and start implementing changes or doing things that I may want, or that, address things that may not be working for me because I'm too afraid of losing what we already have or what we've already invested in this relationship. They're similar, but there is a subtle difference there. And it's another very similar result of this is then you don't make any changes and you don't get the help you need because of the fear of shaking things up and maybe losing the sunk costs. So if you notice, the sunk cost fallacy often keeps us from talking about things that need to happen in the relationship, addressing changes that need to happen and take place to keep the relationship thriving. This is probably the primary way I see it, is we're so concerned about losing, the sunk costs that we're not willing or able to make the necessary steps to actually feed, nurture, and take care of the relationship. It keeps us from really addressing things that need to be addressed. So examples of where I see sunk costs show up in a mixed faith marriage, obviously talking about the faith transition. And this can look like talking about church attendance. I see it definitely showing up talking about division of roles and gender roles. I see it in parenting, wanting to talk to the kids and change parenting approaches, but being so hesitant to do that because of sunk costs. Definitely you see it in wanting the community, the sunk costs we have in a community, whether that's a ward community or an extended family community. A lot of fear around that. And so people hide or avoid or don't talk about things that need to be discussed out of fear of losing those sunk costs in the community. So how this can impact you is, if you're noticing the theme here, a lot of times the sunk cost fallacy is really fear-based. Fear on losing something. And I get it. There's always that risk. It's kind of like it won't be as good moving forward as it was in the past. Afraid of what we're losing, afraid of what won't be anymore. And I get it. That's a legitimate, real fear. And I would offer one helpful way to address that and counter that for some of you might be to also ask yourself, well, what might I be gaining? What might I be opening the door to? What might be a benefit of doing this, changing this, addressing this, talking about this. Yes, there might be something lost, but there also might be something gained. Yes, there might be a change that needs to be made, and there also might be a change that can really help things. So I like to question, okay, yeah, something might be lost, but what might be gained? I also like to consider that as scary as it is, sometimes it's actually a really good idea to burn things down and rebuild. You're smarter, more experienced, have more ideas. Like, you've got real boots on the ground experience now that maybe you didn't have 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago when you were putting in all these sunk costs. Maybe you've got some better ideas and better approaches. When I'm talking about burning things down, I'm not necessarily saying burn down your whole marriage and throw it away and start all over. But I think it can be really, really helpful to not to divorce ourselves from patterns, to divorce ourselves from habits, to divorce ourselves from cycles that aren't providing any benefit to our relationship, to our marriage, and to us as individuals. That's what I would consider burning down and rebuilding. Those things that, while there may be some costs associated with them, really aren't helping anymore. Another thing to consider if you find yourself stuck in this sunk cost fallacy a lot, this is what I consider to be a sunk cost fallacy antidote, is considering the idea that it's not that serious. Like, the sunk cost fallacy is wrapped around in like, this is really serious. This is a big deal. This will be a really detrimental loss. When you can just bring in like, maybe this isn't so serious. Maybe life isn't so serious. And I know this isn't for everybody. This is just an idea to consider if this works for you. But that can be a helpful antidote if you're really getting tripped up over the sunk cost fallacy and it's preventing you from making some decisions you need to make in your marriage, getting some help you need to do, and making some improvements. So, questions to ask yourself if you think this might be happening with you. Where are you using sunk costs to keep you stuck? Where are you letting fear stop you from doing what might be scary, but also potentially good and enlightening and invigorating to you and your marriage? And then consider this: it's never, ever too late to evaluate why you do things. It's never too late to change what you do or your reasons for doing them. And a lot of times, if you're telling yourself that it's too late, it's probably because of a sunk cost fallacy. Okay, ask those questions and see if maybe this is something going on with you. If you are looking for additional help for your mixed faith marriage, I'm glad you found this podcast. I hope you are using it and getting lots of ideas from it. I'd also invite you to go and check out my online home study self-directed course where I teach you what I consider to be the core teachings and skills you need to have a very successful mixed faith marriage. Teach it to you in a series of modules. It's intense, it's in depth. This is not a light lifting course. This is for those of you who are very serious about making some changes and improving your mixed faith marriage. Go and check out my course at brookeboothcoaching.com. It might be a really great tool for you to use to create a strong and vibrant mixed faith marriage. All right, wishing you the very best.